Let's see what we have next here on the agenda. Well, this is the wonderful book that hopefully going to learn out of. And if I just turn this on, then you'd see it as well. The book's been around forever. I can't remember. There's a date on the front cover. I don't remember. 87. And that's the second edition. It hadn't changed much in there. Acoustics and sound hasn't changed since they figured out math. Some of the best books were written, in the 30s when they started figuring out all the formulas for this stuff. And the physics hasn't changed at all. What has changed is technology and the equipment. And luckily this book is new enough where all the equipment is relevant. 10 years previous to that book, all the equipment before then is totally outdated. The best thing about the audio industry today is that all the equipment is pretty damn good. I mean, there's not a garbage piece of equipment out there for the most part. You purchase something today, like this mixing board when it came out, it was the cheapest at the time at probably $800. But now they have, the same company has a mixing board for $250 that is every bit the quality of a mixing board. Now when I say quality, I mean you put a signal in and it passes the same signal without degrading it out its output for $200. It does it the same way as $1,000 or $100,000 mixing board. The difference is you have different EQ, different bus assignments where you can have up to 24 different outputs and things like that. So once you get the general knowledge of the board itself, the size of it's irrelevant. So this is pretty much an outline from the book. If you want to crack your book open and leaf through it. These will be the areas that we'll cover. And these are each of the headings within the book itself. The audio signal, what it is, the basic purpose of the sound system, and then input and output transducers, basically microphones and speakers, and then we'll discuss a little bit of how to put all the system together. Frequency response, we'll go through the difference, the definition, and what frequency response means. Voice and instrument ranges, each thing you put a microphone in front of has a range at which of frequencies that it puts out, and certain microphones will pick up every frequency and certain microphones won't, and we'll discuss that totally as well. The decibel is a term used for sound. It's sound levels, sound volume. We'll describe that fully. We'll get into terms like RMS and the difference between level, volume, gain, and loudness. The next section is on dynamic range and headroom. Headroom is a big factor in dynamic range. What headroom means, and we'll get into much later, is that how loud, what's the difference between the loudest passage and the softest passage. And the inverse square law is another huge factor in the acoustic properties of sound. It just tells you that every time you double the distance away from a source, be it from a speaker, or be it from a person, or be it from a barking dog or a siren, the sound decreases 6 decibels every time you double the distance. And that factor holds true outdoors with any sound. And indoor sound, we'll talk about reflections. This is a good section when it comes to churches because we'll get the understanding of how the boundaries or walls affect the sound, and what a standing wave is, how the sound actually reflects into itself and creates a frequency of its own that you didn't actually create. And critical distance is my favorite point about sound. It's the point at which the reverberation in the room takes over and is louder than the original sound. And that's something that we want to increase that critical distance to as far back in this room as we can. We'll touch a little bit about block diagrams, which is basically just pictures representing each part of the sound system, so you can understand the signal goes in here and out here and through here and down here and out this way. The next one on how to read and interpret specs is a section that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, because, as I was saying before, the equipment today, unless you come upon an old piece of equipment, the equipment today is very good, where it used to be people would try to cheat you out of, the specifications. They'd say this microphone can do this when it really couldn't, and just they would manipulate the specs to make you believe that the equipment can do things that it can't. But today's equipment has gotten to a point where it's all of a very usable quality. It may not be superior quality, but it's all very usable. And I can't think of hardly any gear out today that's sold that is of subpar quality. There are some microphones for $29 that don't work as well as microphones that are $150, and you can buy a mixing board for $69. And hopefully at the end of this class you'll be able to make the determining factor if something like that can work for you or not. And because some of those cheaper pieces of equipment can work and some of them don't work as well. We'll also go into why don't the ears always correlate with the specs? If the spec sheet says it's perfect and I plug something into it and it doesn't sound right, why is that? We'll touch over that. Then we'll also get into microphones. Microphones it's a fantastic area to go into because there's really so much to learn about it. First of all, it's an input transducer. It converts the signal in the air into a signal that the mixing board can understand all the way through back out into the speaker. But there's a lot to know about microphones, and the general understanding of microphones will help you out immensely anytime you pick up a microphone and wonder if this one's better than this one. Then we'll start getting into the mixers. All the different sections of the mixers, be it the preamplifiers is what you have to plug a microphone into, and we'll get into why that is. And the difference between mixers and consoles, basically they're the same word. A mixer is a small one and a console is anything large or too large. And all the different aspects of the mixers, including stage monitors. Where's my little thingy? We'll get into stage monitors and microphone splitting when you have a separate mixing board for the monitors than you do for the front of house. And then the reduction of feedback will be a very important aspect, and hopefully when we get into that area we'll actually be able to teach you how to reduce the feedback. And then we'll jump into the power amplifier area, where we'll teach you how to choose a power amplifier, how to use whatever amplifier was given to you. Sometimes we don't have a choice. Here it is. They gave me this amplifier here. It may not be the proper one for this particular situation. It probably has enough watts to move a small vehicle, but knowing how to use it for what it's worth, I can use it with this small system. The loudspeaker itself. Loudspeakers, they're probably the biggest variable in the whole sound system area, because there are so many different kinds, more so than microphones. Microphones, there's several standards that can be used, and if it's not one of the standards, it's a mimic of one of the standards. When it comes to loudspeakers, there is every single different kind under the sun, and we'll talk about the low frequency drivers, the low frequency enclosures, the high frequencies, tweeters. Low frequencies would be subwoofers, or however you'd like to word that. Crossovers, why you need them and what are they. Full range loudspeakers, one speaker that carries all the signal, or individual speakers that carry different parts of the spectrum. And then hopefully we'll get to actually plug in one of the systems that is what we call three-way or four-way, where we have a separate amplifier for the tweeters and the mid-range and the low end and the subwoofers, and we'll have a total understanding of those.